Why do we need democracy education?
Well, our societies label themselves as democracy. So I think it is important to understand what defines a democratic society, what are the key elements without which you cannot call a society as being a democracy, and also why it is good to have democratic principles, procedures, and processes in society.
In brief, and also on a personal level, my answer to the question why we need democracy education is that democracy needs democrats, and being a democrat, being an active democrat, is at times challenging. So ideally, democracy education helps us to cope with this challenge.
Yeah, and I think that we mean often very different things when we talk about democracy, and democracy education can help us to listen to each other and to avoid misunderstanding each other when we talk about this important topic.
Principle of democracy, Democrats, and different understandings of what is democracy. Three very interesting and complementary perspectives. Let's elaborate a bit more on them.
Yeah, I'm happy to elaborate. So democracy is a complex phenomenon, and people understand many different things when they speak about democracy, think about democracy. And our perspectives towards democracy are shaped on where we grew up and when we lived. So for example, myself, I grew up in Germany, and that shapes my perspective towards democracy in a certain way that probably differs from the perspective somebody holds who grew up in ancient Greece. But also within democracies, so within the same culture, perspectives and experiences may differ towards democracy. And so it is important that we are aware of our biases and the ways we see democracy based on our experiences, and that they may differ from the experiences of others. And democracy education can help with this, making us aware of our biases and increasing our value towards cultural diversity and different perspectives towards democracy.
Well, I agree. However, I think that there are, despite this diversity, or within this diversity, some common elements. There are certain aspects that you need to find in all the society in order to be able to call that society a democracy. And I think the first thing is that there has to be a very clear commitment of the governing structures of the society to focus on promoting human dignity and human rights, to ensure equality of citizens and to ensure that all citizens have access to rights as much as possible. Now, this is a major aspect related to the aim of a democratic society. We also have aspects related to the way society is organized and governed. For example, in a democratic society, you need elections, but not any kind of elections. You need elections to be, for example, regular, contested, free, and fair. If you just have elections, but they are not having these characteristics, then you would not have really a democracy. You also have, in a democracy, the need for rule of law. If you don't have laws elaborated based on some procedures and then enforced, respected in a fair way by different institutions in society, then you will not really have a democracy. And besides that, you also need elements related to how democratic processes are functioning in society. You need aspects related to what we can call a democratic culture. You need, for example, people to be ready to engage in dialogue, to respect diversity and pluralism, to engage in debates and accept deliberation as a way to reach some outcome for decision-making in society. And they also need to be open to compromise, to consider the different interests, the different views, and respect each other's interests. So I think that all these elements are important, all these types of elements are important to be able to call a society democratic, regardless of the diversity of contexts and ways in which they are implemented. But we need all these elements all together in order to really have a democracy, and not just one or two of these elements. But we also need then in society, in order for this democratic culture to really work, we need people to have an appreciation for the value of democracy and human rights and cultural diversity. And we also need attitudes, skills, and knowledge and critical understanding that enable people, whether they are citizens or part of the institutions, to really participate in a democracy.
Mm-hmm. A lot of elements and a lot of partly abstract ideas, and at the same time this claim that people need to value these, need to appreciate this. And I think this is the big task of democracy education, to translate these elements, explain, transfer these elements, and show how they are related to daily life, because actually they are. And actually these various elements, abstract ideas, we heard like rule of law, we heard diversity, we heard culture, very big words, the word democracy always flowing around, and it's easy to perceive them as like far away from us, something in the books, but it very much is part of our daily life. And even more importantly, these elements depend on us. Democracy and its the main elements, they don't exist independently on us as individuals and on us as a society. Let me give an example for rule of law. So when you really understand this, you understand rule of law means that you personally, we all mostly abide by the laws and the rules that govern our lives. And if we don't, we are sanctioned if we are caught, but we are sanctioned in a way that is proportionate to our misbehavior and the people sanctioning us. And of course, it can be judges, and many of us maybe never met a judge in person, but this can also be a police officer who finds you because you parked your car in the wrong place, or it can be even a bus conductor because he didn't buy a ticket. And the sanction should be proportionate to your misbehavior, not only, but also these persons sanctioning are bound by very precise rules. And if they don't abide by them, you can challenge the sanction. So this is very concrete, and actually this rule of law only exists because all these different peoples, all of us, kind of put life into it and live it. So this is where democracy as a culture come in. You want to jump in, Kalin?
Yes, and I agree that indeed democracy is a complex concept with different aspects and with different ways of realizing it. And in relation to that, I want to underline that there is no perfect democracy. There is no stable, perfect functioning democracy. You are always having a process. You always have issues to be addressed in any democratic society. And that is why you also depend on people's engagement and their willingness to compromise and engage in a continuous dialogue in a democracy.
Mm-hmm. And I think this willingness is very challenging. And it helps you actually to accept this challenge, to cope with it, to accept that there are different interests and there are interests that are contrary to your own. You have to value democracy to be ready to accept this challenge, to accept that the solution may not fit perfectly your interests only, but also other interests. At the same time, you have to be sure that your basic rights will still be respected and protected. And so to value this, to know this, this is something we can help people develop with democracy education. And this is what I'm talking about, people being Democrats and support, live democracy, actually to accept this challenge, to cope with it, to master it, and to find this balance between respecting others, defending your own interests, and knowing based on which values they do it.
And I think it's also important to mention that you're not alone on this journey and with mastering these challenges. And actually, our project designed several games to help you develop your competences for democratic culture. And so games have always been used to learn and to teach about different things. And it's not a far-fetched idea to use games to learn about democracy, for democracy, and through democracy.
Saskia, made the link already with demo games and the democracy, the learning through games for democracy. Kalin also brought the connection with competences, and Sabine developed a bit more on Democrats. So when we make this transition, the focus is going to be on the games for democracy. Let's start with that part.
Okay, so maybe I can start with how games can help you to learn about democracy. So games can also help you to increase your knowledge and your critical understanding of a certain topic. And in the Demo Games project, of course, we developed games that also increase the knowledge and critical understanding about democracy of those who use our tools and engage in those experiential learning activities. Just to give you an example, there is the game which is called Participedia. And Participedia is a game that introduces players to innovative ways of participating in democratic systems at different levels. For example, the local level, the regional level, national and international levels. And players are exposed to this information on the playing cards. Moreover, those bits and pieces of information on the cards are actually from real world examples. So they get to know more about different ways of participating in democracy that may go beyond their own personal experiences in their own context. And they may be inspired by that and want to learn more about it and critically understand what other experiences are out there. And they can do this with further information that's provided through the game materials and also through the facilitation concept we provide in our manual.
Yes, a game can also support learning for democracy. That means they can contribute to developing skills and attitudes and connecting with the values related to democracy. And if they are organized in of an education process and done well, the games that the Demo Games project is proposing can also contribute in creating an immersive learning experience for young people so that they actually interact with each other, they develop skills and attitudes, and they are in this way ready to transfer those skills and use them in real-life democratic processes. For example, the game Demo Dice invites players to share their personal views and experiences with democracy. And in this way, players realize that there are diverse experiences and they learn to appreciate the fact that there are different perspectives about the same thing. And they have to consider that when they interact with other people in various situations in their life. And this is an essential aspect of democracy that can support the development of a democratic culture.
The games developed in our project also allow youth workers to apply education through democracy. Education through democracy is actually at the core of game-based learning, which is just a special form of experiential learning while doing experiences. And experiences someone created for you, or someone created a setting that you make certain experiences in an educational, more protected setting. For example, the game Utopia, just one of several games, but the one with the maybe most extensive experience you can make, gives players the task to shape the transition to democracy for a small but still complex and very diverse society on the island Utopia. So they experience all sorts of important aspects and core elements of democracy, like conflicts of interest, and then they can influence them, collective decision making, being at times in the minority, at times in the majority, depending on the issue, choosing different decision rules. They experience even the consequences of the decisions they took earlier and probably can revise them. And an experience not all of us already made and maybe will be making, they even experience the responsibility as governors. So taking on the responsibility for the whole of a society with different aspects and interests. This is a game that still lasts long, but for what we talked about, how complex and how diverse democracy is, it still allows you to experience democracy in kind of a one-day game experience.
So we had a great view through 3 different perspectives on why we need democracy education and which are the different competences needed to be participating actively in democratic processes. If you want to learn more on these themes, we recommend you to come to the next modules on the competencies for democratic culture of the Council of Europe that we use as a base for our games, on how to play and facilitate each of the different games of demo games, and also to keep on playing with the demo game games. We have our democracy box with all of the files and a manual that can help you and support you in your learning.